Welcome to episode 9 on the wisdom of Jacob's ladder. My next guest is Machiel Klerk. He's an incredible, well-known fellow clinician and therapist, as well as an outstanding dream guidance, practitioner, and he's been trained and well-versed in Jungian, studies. So he's really going to give us an incredibly deep angle of the higher mind and ways for us to really incorporate and make sense with dreams and messages from higher consciousness in our everyday lives. And I am so fortunate to have Machiel. So please, if you haven't yet, check out the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. So make sure you check out this interview as well as many others. I think with some of us, sometimes we go into the shallow waters of the mind. We don't go as deep. And today I have to be vulnerable. I'm not the biggest dream guy. I don't necessarily know it so much. I'm not as well versed. And Machiel is really going to give myself as well as us all an incredibly deep angle. He's a real rising star within this field. He speaks internationally regarding dreams and how to incorporate them into your everyday life. In addition to being an incredibly well versed psychotherapist, his work is really getting a lot of international grounds and his star is shining. So I'm so lucky and fortunate to have Machiel, and his book, Dream Guidance, published by Hay House, is now available through a multitude of platforms, including Amazon. So I know during our time together, we're going to dig deep and go into the deep waters of the higher mind, and Machiel is really going to lay it out and explain it in a way that we could all understand. While also, I know he's going to give us a lot of tools as well as incredible stories that we could all hold on to. But without further ado, I would love to bring on Machiel, and he's going to really shed simplicity on something that may feel a little bit complex with dreams and really have us to have it more in layman's terms and ways for us to incorporate dreams in our everyday lives. My next guest, Machiel Klerk. Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Jacob. It's a delight to be here. And I've been looking forward to it, and also because of the title of your podcast, Jacob's Ladder, referring to one of the big dreams in the Old Testament. So that was a fun little factoid that made me intrigued.
Wow, I didn't catch on to that. That's a great angle. Yeah, Jacob was sleeping at the angels going up and down the ladder. So you are my perfect guest to bring, because you're talking about all things personified with Jacob and in our channel here. So let me ask you, you are really making the rounds on an international basis. You speak throughout, many different countries, and I see you're really on the radar of helping out so many people. But where was the, not to get too biblical with Jacob, but where was your genesis on this incredibly powerful path that we all are witnessing? How did it all begin for you?
Well, thank you. And well, there's multiple entry points. If we're now that we're talking in this way, I think when I was very young, I was intrigued by the biblical story of Joseph, who was another dreamer, and actually. Metaphorically, in my early 20s, I also found myself in a pit. My father had died when I was young. I didn't know how to deal with the grief. I had a trauma response to that event because we didn't talk about it. So I had tightened up and was closed off from the world. I did not have a future vision, was smoking too much weed on the couch, which made me even more lethargic. And by some fortunate chance, I stumbled upon the works of Carl Jung, who had written extensively about dreams. And so I started to puzzle and look at my own dreams. And at once, the source of life became active again. And the dream started to show me where I was in life and gave me a lifeline out of the pit. So that is where my genesis in some form has started.
Yeah, you and I and many transformative people that I talk to have a similar path where they're having pain,
Right.
and it's about letting go to something greater inside of them and around them that's always been in them. And oftentimes, pain, whether that's grief, whether that's losses in our life, or just the rug being pulled in our life, with the unfortunate passing of your father, really spearheaded and influenced a different way to look at reality. So take me through it, and you were how old with when the unfortunate passing of your father took
I,
place? You said
I was
20.
yeah, I was 10 years old.
You're
Uh,
10 years old,
yeah,
and so I couldn't imagine what that's like, losing a father at that age. But for you, you just years later, you went to like a local library and studying this stuff. Like, how did it all? Because it's hard for a 10-year-old just to go to a library and study Carl Jung. I mean, I'm in my
yeah, yeah,
30s and I'm still trying to understand him. So,
yeah, yeah.
walk me through how that quest,
Yeah,
happened.
that took years. So at 10, my dad died, and my family and my culture didn't know how to grieve, and
Mm,
so there was not no malicious intent in it in any sense. It's just they didn't know, and so we didn't speak about it at home, and so that whole event was stuck in me, just like you
mm,
talked. It I couldn't let it go. It was, and it was only in my early 20s when, by chance, one of my roommates did have a book on Carl Jung, and I picked it up, started to read it, and then increasingly was captivated by what it said, and there is where I got reconnected to dreams.
yes. I definitely want to get into dreams. I know that's your big passion and a lot of the crux of your work, although you do so much beyond that too, from the ground up, like myself. But to those listeners who aren't familiar with Carl Jung,
Yeah.
how would you describe him, and who is he to you in the work that you do?
A beautiful question, especially when you said, who is he to me? Because it was such a prolific thinker, writer, psychologist that lived in Switzerland from 1875 till 1961. And he developed many concepts that have become household names these days, such as archetypes, collective unconscious, synchronicity. He was at the foundation of the development of Alcoholics Anonymous,
Mm,
developed the idea of a complex, and and actually much more. And to me, he was an kind of a guide who traveled into the other world, and found a way to engage with something larger than ourselves. So I see him sometimes as a Western shaman,
mm,
combined with a deep scientific mind, trying to make these deep spiritual experiences available in somewhat of a scientific way to
mm.
try to reach the general audience. So that's my take, and I bet there's other people that have a bit of another take on it, because we all have our own take.
No, no, I think that was beautifully said. And he lived when, in the late 1800s to early 19s, is that early
Yeah,
to mids? Is that?
yeah,
And so, what do you think about it? This man walked and lived on the planet over 100 years ago.
yeah.
And when you read his stuff and his work, it still seems so ahead of its time. It's just fascinating, the timeless insight that Carl Jung was able to shed over 100 years ago. It's incredible.
It's totally incredible, especially if you consider that these days we have access to Eastern tradition, African or North American shamanism, maybe plant medicine, all kinds of ways to get in touch with the other world. And
Mm.
he did it himself. He went through a technique that he later called active imagination. He let himself drop into kind of a meditative state.
He would just go into these deep, shamanistic, meditative states.
Yeah.
I know you do a great deal professionally with your clients, which we'll get into in dream guidance and dream work. But for you, did you have any personal, like transformative experience with your own higher mind or connections in dream states that put you onto this path as well, or was it
Yeah.
just more so through reading Carl's books that it hit your kind of left intellectual brain, or was it an experiential reality for you?
Yeah, his work activated something in me,
Mm,
and then I started having dreams, but also visions in just in this reality. I remember sitting on my couch, and I was pondering about death, and then my whole room was black. It was
wow.
I could it was just a black, not even that the room was black. It was just black, and I was seeing that, and I think, oh yes, death is black. And then at the center of the whole image, a little white dot showed up, and then the white dot, as a white light, took it all over. And
Hmm.
then I thought, death is not only black; it's also white,
Hmm.
and that gave a different sense. And then a couple of weeks later, I was sitting on that couch again, and at once I saw two squares, one black, one white, and I thought, hey, there's death again. And then they had handles to the sides, and with invisible hands, the handles were pulled over each other, and the yin yang symbol formed.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, death is one with life. Life and death are just different sides of the same coin. Death is not just the blackness that I always had imagined it to be, but it presented itself to me as white as well, and black, and being one. And those things, a whole series of those things, continue to happen. And I also noticed that there's a self-revealing aspect in nature. When we turn towards the wound, just like you mentioned early on, we're
Hmm.
kind of wounded healers.
Hmm.
And when we turn towards the wound, the wound start healing, and life shows also its benign side.
Hmm.
And so more of those things, but that's where
Sure.
it started. Yeah.
Like many of my guests, it seems like your own pain and grief accelerated your own purpose that
Yeah.
are influencing thousands of people each and every day. But from that genesis and that seed of pain, you're able to find that light. And it's such a beautiful image of the yin and the yang. I never thought of it in that regard with life and death, but it's true. Within death, there's a part of life, but it's all just like one eternal moment. Um, let's talk a little bit about dreams because I know there's so much literature in writing. So for you, my first question is what defines or constitutes a dream, for people, or how do you define a dream? Because some people could, say that this is the dream and that's the reality. So what's a real dream?
Yes. The best initial question: what is a dream? And maybe we can go, and the listeners too, to maybe a recent dream, or a dream that they still remember well. It can be an older dream with a lot of energy in it. And when people do that, and you go back in that dream, like I had last night a dream that where there was somehow an an an, uh, an volcano outburst happening, and I remember walking outside my house,
Hmm.
and I saw the ashes and pieces of earth coming down.
Hmm.
Now, that is the experience that we all have. We are in a dream. We are in a dream world.
Hmm.
And it sounds very a basic observation, but it shows that a dream is not a movie that we watch at night.
Hmm.
We are in a world interacting. And so, therefore, the dream is not some message from mystery source X to us.
Hmm.
No, we are in this world interacting with some larger phenomenon. And so a dream is a world we find ourselves in. It's populated by all kinds of states of consciousness, and we enter it during the night. But actually, when we wake up, that world doesn't disappear. It remains coexisting to this reality. Whether we imagine it to be two streams of consciousness that coexist at the same time, or you have this world and the other world, or other worlds coexisting, there are multiple streams of consciousness coexisting, and the dream is just another stream of consciousness that presents itself as a world.
So we just say in other ways, it's just kind of like getting rid of our barriers or our filters between that world and just kind of entering higher awareness. Because we hear the term daydream, so it doesn't seem
Right.
like you need to be asleep at night to have a dream. Like you could just kind of let go and have this visceral reality kind of filter in through your mind. So we just say just kind of like letting go of those parameters and barriers to the higher awareness.
Yes, and we can do that proactively by doing things during the day to let it go is in a more relaxed state, and you get the daydream comes up. And then if you stay attentive to the daydream, sometimes first usually the daydream is a bit here, but it can really become completely around you. Just like when people read a novel, they are in the story. They are walking in the forest together with the hero, and they don't see the rest of the room. They just see the story around them. And that is the imagination or the other world just coming in. And so it's not never far away. It's interconnected.
It's kind of like what Rumi referred to with like windows without walls and just clear sight, clear vision, fully presence with it. And now, regarding dreams, because I listened to a lot of your work, you've certainly inspired and influenced me. It seems like everything in our reality was once a dream or someone's vision. Like, could you give some historical examples of listeners? And I know even for yourself, how dreams have changed the world. Like for
Yeah.
you, I know for you personally, this has impacted you. So how has dreams impacted you, as well as some historical examples of influencers who changed the world? What innovations have happened through dreams that you
Yes,
know?
many innovations in my own life. Big one is that the Jung platform, my online company, came from a dream. But the song "Yesterday" from the Beatles
Yeah.
was came to Paul McCartney in a dream.
Wow.
He heard the tune and wondered where it came from, and if he had picked it up, and it was completely original. And many artists have that. They have a dream suggesting a piece of art or music
Mhm.
or the storyline. Even Nobel prizes have been won based on dream revelations. The largest oil field in Kuwait was
Mm.
in the 1930s revealed to a man in a dream that
Wow.
showed him the location, and then he listened to his dreams, went to the local king or sheikh or of the
Mm.
country, and they believed him, and they started
Mm.
drilling. And I bring that example up that you can see is dreams are from the very practical, from to they come with business inventions, music, anything that people are creatively working on in their life. The dream is there to helps to weave it forward. Probably the dream is actually bringing it in. We're working with it. We're weaving further what the dream brings, even if we're not conscious of it. And then when we listen to the dreams, it can help us speed up, bringing in creativity in our life with anything that is relevant for our life.
Knowing these things, that influence your inspiration to really help out seeing how dreams have literally changed the world? Was that a little bit of an impetus behind your passion and just getting people to really maximize their dreams to maximize this world and our experiences?
Yeah, of course, like many of these things, it started very much with myself, that I noticed, oh, my dreams and the larger psyche is
Mm,
able to help and heal me
mm,
from this tremendous heartbreak and give me inspiration for life. And then in the same time, you read that, hey, it does this for Jung and others. And then slowly, by exploring dreams, I started noticing, oh, dreams have been already there in almost any
mm,
spiritual tradition. Revelations come through dreams,
mm,
uh, and then uh, and then my own work with later on with patients helped, and
mhm.
yeah,
A lot of things changed. Yes. Well, I'm wondering too. It almost reminds me. Have you ever heard of Edgar Cayce? He's known as the,
sure,
sleeping prophet. But when he wasn't under trance of hypnosis, he was just a regular kind of guy. But he just opened himself up to this incredible world as a trance channeling medium. So the point that I'm trying to make, it seems like we all have access to this. We don't have to see ourselves as something incredibly complex with our personality or brilliant or IQ. We all have access to this brilliant world, and that's something that we could all benefit from by really understanding and knowing our dreams and how to incorporate those messages, right? Is that about right?
yeah, I totally agree with you. We are waves on the ocean, so every individual is a wave.
Mm,
And actually, every wave is just made out of the ocean and is the
mm,
same substance as the ocean. So just we are made of the same substance as the universe. We are extensions of the universe in a certain sense. We are part of the universe. And so we are all connected to the larger wisdom or intelligence.
mm,
It is expressing itself in us, whether it's the flower or any human. We're all deeply connected with this creative force that expresses itself in anyone in dreams as well. And
mm,
I love what you say. It's not your IQ or gender or race or culture. It's all connected. And many common people had a wild dream that connected them to their ancestors or told them that their sister was pregnant or gave them an idea. And then you don't even have to believe in it, or you don't have to have read books.
mm.
It's there. It bursts forward. If we turn inside or pay attention to the night, we'll get helpful guiding dreams.
Absolutely. I think we all have a divine spark within each and
Right.
every one of
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
and every person has connection. It's just a matter of our ability to let go and get out of our own way to have that light, infiltrate itself throughout our life. Now, you mentioned like you were talking about the waves of the ocean. Is that what's called the collective unconscious? Is that kind of what you're referring to? Because I know a lot of people, and again, this is not so much my thing. I'm not a Jungian therapist, but is that along the lines of what the collective unconscious means? And how would you define this? Because I've noticed this term is really getting thrown around a lot by even like casual people that I talk to, not really so into this.
Hmm.
They're like throwing black belt moves at me. I'm like, whoa, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll ask my guy Machiel over here what exactly you're talking about. How would you describe that?
Yes, in this Jungian idea of how the psyche is he has a layered view. So let's say that the foam on the wave is the ego, is the field of the ego, and in his theory, the ego is important. It's just that function that says I and makes decisions and knows where the keys are and knows that how to turn on the television. And then you would have the wave as the personal unconscious.
Mm,
That's mainly material that belongs to us, our own history, our own experiences. And then you have another layer where we are actually interconnected with other people,
mm,
and which is at the same time a storehouse of the human
mm,
history and is filled up with what Jung would call archetypal figures.
mm,
So the whale in the ocean is an archetypal figure, and that is a whale for you and me. And in his theory, it's experiences as mother or old wise man, old wise woman, the hero. Those are archetypal characters that we share as a humanity, just like every wave shares the ocean with everyone else and is actually the same ocean for everyone else.
Right. So, I mean, I know we throw around the term oneness, but some people think that oneness is sameness, like that we're all the same. So, kind of what you're referring to is a way is just the interconnectivity of
Yeah.
all parts, and sometimes how we see ourselves as fragmentations of that interconnected tapestry, but we all are a part of it. And this could kind of explain psychic phenomenon and how, sometimes one
Mhm.
person is thinking one thing, we tap into that because it's like this wave of the internet that we're all tuned into, but we have to have our Wi-Fi to really receive a lot of these downloads, and that Wi-Fi has to be Verizon or pretty strong. Again, I'm not promoting Verizon
Yeah,
here; they
yeah,
do
yeah,
well as it is, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Is that about
We,
right? Yeah.
yeah, we all are antennas, and we all are connected to the air with the information,
Mm-hmm.
and it's floating by through intuitions, thoughts, daydreams, and at night we are actually sinking a little bit further into the airwaves and get even a stronger signal. But because the signal is often in a language that's a bit weird to us, and our culture doesn't really value that signal slash the dreams, a lot of people dismiss it. But
Mm-hmm.
some people are the signal is on, they see it, and they get a fantastic idea for whatever business, art, their life, how to find a loved one, how to eat healthier, just guidance. It just guides us in the realization of our own being. It's
Mm-hmm.
interested in helping and educating. So the source of the wave, of the signal, the larger awareness appears to be interested in helping and educating.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's dig deep because I mentioned you are a deep guy. You go into the deep waters of the ocean, and hopefully, after this, my viewers will learn how to be that great surfer and navigate some of these waves of the oceans. Let's talk about your dreams in further depth. I wanted to know because, at least for us as like casuals to this stuff, we know, of like reoccurring dreams,
Hmm.
precognitive dreams. What are some of the main, types of categories of dreams, as well as, symbolism that some people have within their dreams? I don't know if you do dream interpretation at all, but what would be some, symbolism? Because not every dream, is a direct representative of something. Some could be symbolism. So,
Yeah.
how would you really just help out really to clear the air with the dreams and categories of them?
Well, there are many categories, but indeed, precognitive dreams, dreams where ancestors seem to visit, dreams that show what's going on with someone else,
Hmm.
more diagnostic dreams, dreams like an X-ray portraying what goes on within ourselves,
Mm.
dreams that portray future potential, like figures or characters that show qualities that we either have repressed or have not yet acknowledged.
Hmm.
And common dream themes are dreams about being naked in public, being in a car and somehow can't get to the steering wheel or the brakes aren't working. And then one way for people to look at their dreams is what for especially with objects, you can ask the question, what is the function of? So
Mm.
what is the function of a car? Oh, it helps me move from A to B. It helps me move through life. Then you could say, oh,
Mm.
okay, the way you move through life. And on this moment, you can't, and you try to slam on the brakes and the brakes don't work. So you have a hard time slowing down. Uh,
Mm.
you, and then the question is, do you recognize that somewhere in your life?
Mm.
So that gives a bit of an explanation. Or a classic one is people are very stressed in life, and then they still need to do an exam from high school, and they
Mm.
run through school to the classroom and can't find it.
Mm.
It is the sense of, oh, I feel like I'm being tested, and I feel I'm late for my test, or I don't even know what I'm
Wow.
exactly tested about. Those portray what goes on inside, or being naked in public, being naked is not fully dressed, not being fully prepared, or being fully, or being very vulnerable. And
Mm.
then that those are a couple of the big dream themes that people probably have here and there.
It's interesting because I work very closely with a lot of mediums.
Hmm.
And when the mediums will give messages from loved ones on the other side, it will come through similar to what
Yeah.
you're talking about, where it's almost kind of like a game of charades. And so you just have to wonder when we talk about these dreams, it's like it doesn't seem like they're just showing up because they're going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and all of a sudden they just decide to show up. No, it seems like they're always there and this is their language, but
Yes.
rather we're, just kind of heightened, or you want to talk about vibrational frequencies, our ability to really receive these radio signals and understand them improves through getting into some of those deeper states of consciousness. Is that kind of it? It seems to be similar
Yeah.
from a psychic field to dream state. It's all the same to me in terms of their language and how they work. Yeah.
Totally right. It's the psyche, whether it's in dreams or in fantasy or in daydreams or in with mediums, uses a symbolic, metaphorical language, and so and usually it presents things into a three-dimensional reality. So, like the dream is a three-dimensional reality, and I might be walking in a dream and walk into a one-way street.
Wow. Yeah.
Then that is the metaphor of what's happening in my life. It could, and then you wonder, why don't the dream just say, "Hey, you're walking in a one-way street," and
Mm,
and it's just not the language of the larger intelligence. It portrays emotional states and thoughts and feelings in three-dimensional reality, and that is it across any of these spectrums, including the mediumship.
it's a language that people need to familiarize themselves because, as you said, it has changed the world. But people need
Yeah,
to know if
yeah,
it's a direct representation or something of symbolism or
yeah.
interpretation. And that's kind of like a segue that I wanted to talk about the elephant in the room, which is dream incubation. I
Hmm.
know that, from watching your videos and getting so much out of it, that seems to be a big crux of your work. But for listeners, I've never heard the term prior to that. I have to be so. What exactly is dream incubation? Could you give a little
Yeah.
bit of an explanation of it? Yeah.
It's a very old technique in which people ask the dream a question, or the spirit, or God, or the soul. But let's say for the East, the dream, they ask the dream a question before they go to bed in
Mm,
order to have or trigger a helpful dream response. And this
mm,
comes back in the Asclepian tradition, African shamanism, Hinduism, and even in modern days, Harvard did
mm,
a research on it and noticed that there was a fair amount of cases
mm,
where this technique actually worked. And then they also looked at why does it work and does it not work. We can't talk about it, but as a definition, it is if people have a question today after listening to this and they think, whatever is relevant to them. So that's important. Take a question that's
mm.
emotionally relevant. You can ask your dream for support.
Well, as the saying goes, "Ask and ye shall receive." Right?
That's so
But
true.
is it like a game that they play? Because it almost seems like, I mean, from listening, it has to be like a specific like way of asking it,
Hmm.
and our language has to be very intentional. Like, doesn't the dream world know our hearts and minds desires? Like, why is that question so important? The exact language that we need to use that has to be so specific. I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It sometimes feels like the dream is a bit of a stickler.
Yeah, it has to be
Um,
like it's like almost like a Virgo. It has to be very perfectionistic, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I don't know. My mind's racing 1,000 miles an hour. I don't really like. I'm
yeah,
not exact like that. Like how? Why does that work? Like it seems kind of cruel. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's true. I once asked the dream, what do you want the readers of my book to know about you? And then I had a dream in which a very a wise woman had become the CEO of a company, and she was the best manager in the world. And she, if you wanted help, she would help you. If you
Mm,
wanted to figure it out on your own, she would let you do that, even if that would take 2 or 3 years.
mm,
And that was the dream. And I think what it refers to, what how I took it is, we're connecting with this wise intelligence
mm,
in the dream that is really a great manager, a help, but
mm,
it also allows for free will. So if you want to do it on your own, it's totally free will. There's no judgment on it. Even if you walk into 10 pits and then try to get out, it's all fine. You want to have support on it, it's also fine.
mm,
So the larger awareness is appears to be completely non-judgmental and gives us space. So if we it's not gonna say, oh, you I think you meant this. It wants you to say, oh, if you want to have the experience of this, then it's going to try to help you. If you want another experience, it's going to try to help you that way. And so for us, it is the game is indeed a bit figure out what is the experience or the question we really want to have answered. And
mm,
therefore, it takes a bit of time in that initial phase to think, what do I really want to know?
mm,
And there we often get with a lot of questions. I want this, I want that. I could ask this, but we can go multiple nights back. But there's one part what makes or breaks the success of this method,
mm.
figuring out what we actually really wanna ask.
The power of intention, in other words,
Yeah,
is everything from our dreams to the lives that we live, the
yeah,
decision that we make, and getting crystal clear with what exactly it is that we want.
yes,
And spirit will be able to answer. So I know as a therapist, I was kind of sitting back, clinician to clinician. It almost seems a little bit of this is kind of like the wise mind, type therapy where our clients are getting into the emotions or the emotional mind, and then we kind of ask them to tap into,
hmm,
this inner wisdom, this wise mind or this wise person. And is that kind of a little bit of how people should go about with their questions on their dreams or the dreams themselves, to just tap into this higher self, this wise mind? Is that kind of what you're saying?
yeah. That's a great way of imagining it. That we contact the wise mind, and the wise mind is always there.
Mm,
You can access it in this reality, and a lot of people find that a little bit difficult or need some help with it,
mhm,
but it's very doable. And at
mhm,
night, it's we're in that realm a little closer to it.
mhm,
Our regular defenses are a little bit let go because of sleep,
mhm,
and so if we approach the wise mind that way and also think in it that way, oh, wise mind, I have a question, I would really like help, and then formulate what it is and build a relationship with that wise phenomenon.
mm,
Then it's not only at night, but you start noticing during the day that you have better intuition, that you have more synchronicities happening, and your troubles don't disappear, but you have a wise supporting character in day-to-day life
mm.
that helps, and that makes a big difference in life. It's my own
To
experience. Yeah.
to accompany that wise mind, or to have like a language, because
Hmm.
when I was younger, I would refer to it. I was like in kindergarten. I remember calling my wise mind like a certain name,
Hmm.
and I think for each person, it's important to have a relationship and have a
Yeah.
definition of that inner part of us, because you all have the inner scared child and the
Hmm.
confident wise sage in each and every one of us. And
Yes.
I think it's important that we all have that, the different rungs on the ladder, no pun intended here, um,
Yes.
with biblical Jacob. Um, so I wanted to know, you mentioned psychic phenomenon. I've
Yeah.
known actually professional psychic mediums who have one day they've literally gone to sleep, and the next day something happens, whether it was a dream or when they wake up, and all of a sudden their intuition explodes and their whole lives change from that one sleep. Like, do dreams have like the impact if we're able to have a dream deep enough to kind of change, you know, just our intuition and our psychic, channels? Is that could that be possible? There's
Yes, it very often you see in these indigenous cultures that the shaman, the
mm,
one who can communicate with the other world, and the other world is also the land of the dead, with the ancestors, with the
mm,
deceased, and usually there's an initiatory illness. So the
mm,
person has a psychological illness where they go through a very turbulent phase
mm,
that borders on somewhat psychotic phenomenon. That's a healthy breaking open of the other world.
mm,
And so, in most cases, in most, it's not one night. It's a series of months,
mm,
but with dreams and experiences. But that it is in a certain way initiated by the other world, and they
mm,
initiate us into a different state of consciousness by which we are able to easier and proactively travel into the other world, or have the other world come here, ask questions to whether it's a spirit guide or an ancestor, and then one becomes a healer or a shaman or a medium. The medium and the shaman are usually very closely related.
yeah. Would that be, kind of like when we awakened, we remember our dreams? How would you view awakening? Is that just a waking up from a dream and remembering the dream? Is that a part of the awakening? Is just remembering and integrating our dreams, or maybe recognizing the real dream and the reality that we're living on? How would you define awakening to you?
Yeah, I think that, well, if you take it, for example, in a lucid dream, a dream in which you know that you're dreaming, then you're in the dream and something weird happens, or you see grandma and you think, oh, that's weird, grandma is dead. Oh my gosh, this is a dream. So there you have a moment in which you realize the reality you're in.
Mm,
And so your awareness is broader. I'm like, oh, I'm in the dream reality. And usually what we have is the reality we're in, we just take as the reality and the only reality.
mm,
Because in the dream, people walk around, they believe everything, they see the crocodile, they run away. They just don't know it's the world of dream. Because if they knew, they would maybe send a crocodile off or fly away or do something. And the same with this reality, because we wake up out of this reality and now we're in this reality and we think this reality is the only reality and this is the real reality.
right, right.
And
There's just a lot of misrepresentation or stigma with dreams, and just the word itself. Is there a
yeah,
part of you that almost wants a different word for it, or just kind of sees it so misunderstood? It's kind of like I talk to psychics. They're just so tired of the word because there's so much baggage and misrepresentation of it. I mean, if you
yeah.
like could have like another word for it, like would you like think of something else, or I don't know.
No one asked me that question, but I love it because indeed I think dreams usually have the notion of not real,
Right. Yeah.
but in a certain way, there's nothing more real than dream.
Mm,
It's the same imaginal world that is created there as this world. This world is not a dream, but this world is constructed like dream.
mm,
So it's an and usually people say about this world is the waking world, but actually at night our consciousness is also awake but not very aware. It's not that the light goes off. We otherwise we wouldn't engage with the crocodile and run. So our mind goes on. So I like to call this reality denser reality because it's
mm,
denser than the dream.
mhm.
But the dream, maybe we should have a different name of it for it.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it would allow people to just have more traction and just to kind of see, because I don't know about you. I'm sure you experience this, but when I have a dream, it feels more real than this reality. And I wake up from it. I could see myself physically in my apartment on my couch, having, communication with one of my loved ones, and I wake up, I'm
Hmm.
like, how on earth was that a dream? Like that was a dream, and I'm waking up to this. I'm like, no, this is the dream. That was the reality.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just funny. Yeah.
Well, and I think both are realities. The source of life seems to, like a fountain, generate worlds. It creates worlds. It creates this world and the world of dream. But actually, what happens is through our own, we are currently our own, the source of life is creating this world we perceive. It's an
Mm,
imaginal world, because the
mm,
world that we see out there is actually all created in here. We have some
mm,
senses, field perceptions coming in, and it turns it into a world. In identical way, it turns the at night the dream. It just doesn't have the outside stimuli, but the
mm,
same imaginal creating power creates a world there, and on
mm.
this moment, the same power creates this world, but you and I have a completely different experience of the world, and the world, it's like the inner painter, in my case, paints my world, and your inner painter paints your world, and it does it constantly. So the world
Wow.
is constantly it creating itself, and all these billions of people and animals, and they have all these worlds. So we literally live in a massive multiverse with,
Wow.
with world creating power, and that's
It almost reminds me of the movie The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy enters just this higher dimension and just recognizes she's been on the bed in the same place the entire time. Her physical body was there, but it just shows us that our mind, and this is congruent with near death experiences, that our higher mind is so much more than our physical body. It's filtered through it, but we are connected to so much more than just
yeah,
this reality.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and a near death experience or an out of body experience
Hmm.
is generated in the same way as dream,
Yeah.
and there you have another world that you enter, which is this is not the same as the dream world, and definitely different than this world,
Hmm.
and so that's maybe a different frequency, but the way that world is created is again our imagination creates this world and presents it again in a symbolic,
Hmm.
metaphorical, and a little bit literal way.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of like go into a little bit higher here, turn up the volume. I know you really you talk about the astral plane as well as spirit guides in dreams and connecting to our loved ones in dreams. How would you suggest, that works, and what place are we connected to? Because we hear the term astral plane, astral travel. For my viewers, like how does that work in dreams, and how could we connect to our angelic,
Hmm.
forces and loved ones on the other side, and what impact could that have in our everyday life?
Yeah, well, the impact can be huge. It's life changing to know that you're not alone, that there's
Mm,
support, that the ancestors are there, that there's life after death, that there
mm,
are some criteria that are helpful when you die to have
mm,
achieved. So it's not necessarily more money, but more the
mm,
realization of your own potential.
mm,
And it's maybe staying back in the metaphor of the radio. Let's say that we're a radio or an antenna. That there are different frequencies,
mm,
and these frequencies present themselves as worlds.
mm,
And these worlds are all these frequencies are there, and it's just where we tune into. And part of the tuning into has to do with this intention. So
mm,
we set the intention. I would love to connect with my deceased father.
mm,
Then we start strengthening that the relationship to that frequency. But what
mm,
we also want to do is give up our expectation of how that will look like, because
mm,
the easiest would be, oh, the door goes open, there's that. But
mm,
that's never how that goes. Some people can see their deceased loved ones, but usually that's not what happens, because most people would freak out actually if they would start
mm.
seeing their loved one,
Right, right.
and the other side knows that, and so let's say you want to connect to your deceased loved one, and you have a question like, how are you doing? Write down the question, do a little ritual, light a candle, and then just feel if something if you notice something, a thought, because
Mm,
very often they communicate in thoughts or images. Like the
mm,
medium will see an image maybe of someone sitting in a rose garden,
mm,
and then say, oh, it looks like they're doing well,
mm,
or something. And the biggest thing that we haven't learned as a culture is trust your own intuition. Trust
mm,
the first thing you go with.
mm,
Let's say I would ask that, how are you doing? And then I see, oh, it starts becoming a bit white now, and I see it becomes a room, and he sits actually an elegant room, enjoying reading a book. Oh, that is interesting. That is what happens, and then I can continue to engage with that image, and say, how is it there? And it looks very relaxed, and he's at ease.
mm,
Now, dare I trust this, or do I say, "Oh, that is nonsense"?
mm.
And that's the most difficult thing for us to lean.
Decipher, and yeah, because a lot of people, it's all different paths in the mountain, but kind of similar dynamics that we all face. Working with people, like I guess, how could people know when something is based off of representation, grief, and wishful thinking
Yeah,
of wanting that loved one, or it's a real connection that we're
yeah,
having? How could we clarify what's real versus what's representative, figurative, or
yeah,
just desirable to see?
yeah. In the alchemical tradition, they differentiated between real imagination and
Mm,
fabrication.
mm,
And fabrication would be, oh, I see my dad, and he comes to me and gives me a big hug, and he
mm,
loves me so much, and I'm just, my mind is fabricating this.
mm,
What we have to do is slow down, and then let the image itself come. So if we
mm,
start seeing, hey, this is a surprising image, I hadn't thought about this, like the white room with the chair. That's different than, oh, I see dad coming to hug me. So that's
mm,
a slight way to make the difference. And usually when there's a certain calmness underneath.
mm,
So, oh, this image feels like speeding up. The
mm,
first one, like, oh, there's dad and he's doing these things, and when I'm speeding up, it's very often my mind doing that. When I slow down, and it feels like, oh, hey, that is surprising. Oh, that feels like calm. That is
mm,
usually one of those ways that you can differentiate between making it up and being presented with something real from the other side.
mm. It defies a lot of what people think. 'Cause when people think that they're dreaming, that they're fully asleep, but from what you're saying, we are actually in many ways more awake, and we're able to engage with some of these things. Now, I'm wondering, and this may teeter on medical, but is that why some people, are exhausted? Even they've tried sleep apnea, they tried everything, and it's a sensitive topic. And I have a friend of mine who has a similar name to you, who literally every time he go to bed, he would be exhausted. And I'm wondering, sometimes are people just so connected, have so much
Yeah,
spirit connection that, and they're so active that no matter what, when they sleep, they're just not fully reinvigorated or recharged. Is that a
yeah.
downside of some of this, or a possibility when we're too engaged in it, or is that the inverse, kind of thing?
No, no, that's right. Sometimes we have dreams, and it feels like, I've been working all night.
Yeah.
I had that last night a bit with the intensity of the dreams. That was like, oh. If it happens too long, we can also say to the dreams, gosh, dreams, this is just too intense. Please slow it down. I'm happy to listen. I will write you down in the morning, but I also need my 8 hours of sleep.
Hmm.
This way we can't work.
Hmm.
So we can have a real conversation with the other side, whether we're asleep, before we go to bed, anytime. But also treat it like you meet that wise old man or woman, and but it's not a begging exercise. Oh, please, please. No,
Mm,
I need this. This can't go on.
mm.
I need to sleep. So then the other side also knows. Now it's up to us to slow it down a little bit,
Yeah.
and they respond to that.
It's just amazing how pivotal our sleep is from a mental health
Yeah.
perspective, in having a baseline of managing our depression, our anxiety, our
Hmm.
mood. When a
Yeah.
client comes into my office and they're depressed or anxious, the first thing I'll ask them is, how's your sleep? How's your exercise? And some things that we overlook, we don't recognize how pivotal it is. And from firsthand experiences, seeing, my own friend and his struggle that, it just made life impossible. I could tell you it's so pivotal. But for those listeners who may have anxiety, maybe have difficult sleeping, or some of those more advanced ones who are looking to connect with their loved ones or their spirit guides, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a technique. It's called the 5-step technique. Is that
Yeah.
accurate? So
Yes.
what, like, let's say I'm about to go to bed tonight.
Hmm.
Talk to me. Like, what are those practical steps that I could utilize within my life? Pretend I'm a client. What could I do to follow this
Yeah.
brilliant
No.
technique?
So
Yeah.
step one is really identifying what problem do you want to address or what desire, and then usually take the one with the most energy,
Hmm.
something that's really disturbing or exciting to you. And now maybe there is something that comes to mind, or the person says, "Oh, I'm really anxious lately." Okay, anxiety. Now, let's address the anxiety. Then step two is phrase the question. And you can do that one through a written form, like how can I better deal with the anxiety? And almost always it's better dealing with than overcoming, because
Hmm.
anxiety is very often some form of a warning signal. And you don't want the warning signal to go out. You
Hmm.
just don't want to have it go on all the time. And how can I better deal with the anxiety, or what causes my anxiety?
Hmm.
I had a client once who asked what causes my anxiety. Then you do a series of rituals as if you are meeting the old wise man or the great healer in the other world.
Hmm.
And maybe you make a drawing of your anxiety, light a candle, take a couple of minutes of meditation, and you do that again before you step in bed, so that you get in a somewhat calm space, or in a calm anxiousness, and say, dream, what
Hmm.
causes my anxiety?
Hmm.
And then this woman had a dream in which she was at the beach and saw a woman full of tattoos pointing to the ocean. And when she saw the ocean, she saw all the currents being lit up. So she could
Hmm.
see where all the currents were. And she decided to go in the ocean, and she noticed if she was swimming with the current, everything was fine. But if she was swimming against the current, she would get anxious and
Hmm.
exhausted. And that was her dream. And so she thought, oh, my anxiety shows up when I'm not swimming along with the current of life, but when I'm deviating from my path.
Hmm.
And so let me start noticing in day to day life, when do I get anxious? And am
Hmm.
I doing the things I feel I should be doing, I could be doing? Or am I doing something that actually the ocean starts saying, hey, you're getting off your path?
Hmm.
And that was and then she had to work with it, but that was very helpful. And so
Wow.
people also can have a dream, make sure you write it down in the morning because they
Hmm.
evaporate, and then work with it. So those are in a nutshell the steps that I lay out in that book, but that everyone based on this conversation can try tonight.
Yes. And would you recommend also writing down stuff in the morning?
Yeah.
Because I guess my question is twofold. A, why do some people remember and forget dreams? And also, what's the best way to remember them when you do wake up? Is it to have that yellow legal pad and to write them down? What
That's
would you
it.
say?
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the one and only thing that really
yeah.
works. At
Yeah.
night, our short-term memory doesn't function well.
Mm.
That's why we forget those 8 hours. But where you
Right.
alluded to before is actually our mind doesn't fall asleep. It
Mm.
continues to have all kinds of experiences at night. So people think about sleep that you're out, but you're
Mm.
not. You're just your memory is not working. But you have all kinds of experiences, and so
In many ways, we're more alive there, and I think the sleep is when you're alive, but you're not fully connected. You're just kind of like sleep at the wheel. You're just kind of like a vegetable here. That to me is someone who's asleep, but versus someone who's awake, they're fully
yeah,
connected. Um,
yes.
but is that a myth though? Because some people will say, well, if you're not supposed to remember that dream, you won't. Is that kind of like a myth that the universe does not want us to remember things, or all things are possible to remember? We just kind of just don't write it down, or
Yeah,
is
if you
that?
don't write it down, it's gone, and that has to do with just that your short-term memory doesn't function well. But your memory always starts working less well when you're really connected
Mhm.
to the other side,
Yeah.
or your sense of time changes. Just like if you're in this side, you're in the flow of things, which
Mhm.
is another word of I'm connected with my own deep self, or with my
Mm.
soul, or with my spirit.
Mm.
Then time becomes relative. I've been painting for 2 hours, and gosh, where did the time go?
Mm.
That's because we're connected to the other world, and then the sense of time disappears, and memory becomes a little bit different. But
Mm.
it's not. There's also a sense of free will. You don't have to remember dreams,
Mm.
and if you don't want to wake up and write them down, the universe is totally fine with it,
Mm.
and it will try to help you in other ways as well. But if you do want to tap into the support it gives at night,
Mm.
then you have to do a bit of effort and write it down, because otherwise it's gone.
Seems like this coach that's always trying to push us. And I say, like, when I do past life regressions, messages are repeated until those lessons are embraced.
Hmm.
And it seems like that's kind of like a reoccurring dream where there's this constant nudge
Right.
for us to just say, hey, you need to slow down, you need to take care of your health, whatever that is. So there's
Yeah.
always this higher wisdom, and it's our decision if we want to open up that letter, that envelope from the universe and make sense of it and apply it. Is that kind of about right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. It's you. I think what you've also noticed and alluded to is you could just get stuck in a
Mm.
certain challenge,
Mm.
and either you solve the challenge and you go to the next challenge, the
Mm.
next level,
Mm.
or you continue to have the same challenge.
Right.
And on a certain moment, most of us get bored of that challenge. They're kind of
Mm.
like, why am I again meeting
Mm.
this type of person, or having this anxiety, or why am I still depressed? Well, let's delve into the wound, and actually in the wound, the healing comes, and only till you heal the wound, you can move to the next challenge. It's like
Mm.
you're stuck in page 17 of the fairy tale,
Mm.
and you're still fighting the same dragon till you figure out how to deal with the dragon.
Yeah. Wow. You really have to kind of figure out that space between, kind of like the stimuli and that response, and how we're able to make sense of these representations and how that could help us grow, expand, evolve.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Now, I want to, we're getting close to the end, but I like to finish where we started. And for you, this path really was accelerated through the, unfortunate passing of your father, and how grief seemed to influence your path. I work very closely on my channel and professionally with a lot of parents and families who have lost loved ones. And
yeah.
one time I was speaking at an organization, and they had, that Peter Pan quote where in that place between you're asleep and awake, that place where you remember,
Mm.
that's when I'll come to you. And it's hard to say that with
Hmm.
not tearing up, but
Hmm.
that's so true. But how have you worked personally and professionally on the dream level with those that have lost loved ones? Have you seen this helping? I know for you personally, and how could one, maybe connect to their loved ones or improve maybe their grief through, dream incubation and your work and your practice. Yeah.
Yeah, great questions and many questions in one. Uh, with grief, what I learned that doesn't work is ignoring it.
Mm,
And actually, the old alchemical idea of only the wound heals is
mm,
so true. Where
mm,
we are wounded, that is where we find healing. We don't
mm,
find healing in places that work well.
mm,
It is the wound that is the healer. And that's also why we are,
mm,
as wounded individuals, when we heal our wounds, or at least for a part our wounds, we have some medicine that we can give to other people on
mm,
how to work with wounds.
mm,
So if you meet a therapist or a healer that hasn't been wounded well and dealt with the wounds, it's probably not yet in the right place to be a
mm,
therapist.
mm,
But also for people, we most of us have the tendency not to deal with our wounds,
mm,
and I was one of them. And so turn towards it, but also be compassionate. Don't dive into it.
mm,
Just turn towards it and see what happens. And you start noticing, hey, if I say I want to deal with my grief and I don't know how to, then you maybe start listening at once. You find this podcast, and then a book, and then a person comes on your path. So things start working if you turn towards it and have the intention of I wanna heal this.
mhm,
And then for connecting using the dreams is you could ask your dream, how can I dream? How can I better deal with this grief? How can I cure some of the grief? And then write it down and see what kind of dream you get. Usually get in some form of maybe see a character do something, and then you just do the same as what the character does, whether you understand it or not.
mm.
Give it a shot.
So
And
the language in our questions to the dream is so pivotal. Is this I mean, do you do this also with your clients who may have a dream, they come into your office, they're not sure of it, and they just kind of, you help them work out maybe what this dream is about through the power of questions and having
yeah,
the client empowered, to ask those key questions. Is that stuff that you do with clients too?
yes, and so of course, good questions to ask yourself about if you have a dream is not only what does it mean, but also what is happening. What is the structure of the dream?
Mm,
Oh, I see a lion, and then I get scared, and then I run. Oh, so when you
mm,
get scared, you run. Okay, that's the
mm,
dynamic. Then you don't need to know what lion means and etc.
mm,
You just tease out the psychological structure in
mm,
it. But then you can also take the dream back into the next dream and say,
mm,
wise mind or wise voice or wise
mm,
figure help me further with how I'm running from the lion. What else
mm.
could I do? Yeah, and then see what the
Wow.
dream says.
Wow. And you've seen through your clients some shifts in how they've been able to learn from this and when they apply it, maybe from a mental health perspective, how some of their symptoms tend to decrease. Is that
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that you recognize?
Over time, often a radical transformation from people that can deal again with their trauma or
Mm,
their grief, or are no longer depressed, or have a way better, or when it arrives, they know how to navigate that territory so that they don't get stuck in it.
mhm,
The dream and just the larger psyche is trying to help. And when we build it, what I do try to do is help people connect to their own depths and
mm,
then find a relationship to it so that they can navigate through all these challenges that we have,
mhm.
and then live a more fulfilling life that way.
It's beautiful. Well, thank you. Now, the last thing is, I know you mentioned you have a new book published by Hay House. It almost reminds me of these incredible books that you see from like prophets where they just go to bed with it and it just kind of comes to them, or kind of like Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with
Hmm.
God, a book that was channeled. And even my next guest, Paul Selig, who's going to be in my channel, who
Hmm.
does
Hmm.
all of his books channeled. Tell us a little bit about your new book, and was it like fully channeled, from a dream? I know your platform, the Young platform, was, but how did that manifest itself, author to author? Because I'm just curious from my own perspective, but I know viewers will be too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this wasn't channeled that way. This was more. I stumbled on the technique that you could ask your dream a question, and then
Mm,
I knew that there were many other people that had done it, but I first just figured it out for myself. And so I spent a long time doing that, a year and a half, and then I had in my dream classes, I started teaching this to people. And then I noticed what kind of questions they had, what was not clear. And I built a curriculum that way. And that
mm,
curriculum became the backbone of the book. And
wow.
then some dreams came in that helped me here and there, or I got stuck and I would ask the dream. But that is really how it, yeah, the genesis of the book.
Yes. So it's a tools book
Yeah.
in addition to being educational,
Yeah.
and it will really empower, I know, readers to really fully cultivate their own
Yes.
dreams in their own lives, which I know has changed the world and each person to really brighten their impact and to listen to some of those nudges
Yes.
and insight. Because when we get out of our own way, amazing things could really occur. I'm wondering, we have to bring you on because there's so many different areas that you're on, and you're having such an accelerated impact on a global sphere. You're making the media highlights, you're doing everything. I always say, we know the ending, that there is no end, but we, in this life, we're not sure exactly what's around the corner. Like, what's next for Machiel going on? What do you feel is like your next kind of pull that you have, personally, professionally,
Hmm.
you know?
I it's a great question because I feel something is transforming again. I
Mm.
feel my business is taking a different form. So
You're
I'm
exploding, dude. I mean, you're everywhere. Like see, you're on the radar for sure. Yeah.
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 So I'm dancing with what comes, and I must say
Okay.
I don't truly know what is happening. But like you mentioned before, when we let also life help us reorganize or find its new form. So I'm allowing life to come in, and I'm just every day try to be proactive and follow the impulses and see what works and be close to my feelings, and then see what life is doing.
Surrendering to the flow, in other words.
Yes.
Yeah, last question. Is there any, not parting words because we're eternal, but is there any last messages that you have for our viewers, or anything that you would like to know? Also, any ways for people to purchase, your book. It's called Dream Guidance. Is that right? And the
Yeah.
subtitle you could maybe specify, as well as ways for people interested in some of your online services or classes or global workshops. What's the best way to handle those kind of
Yeah.
predicaments?
So the book is indeed called Dream Guidance. It's available in Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And
Mm,
if they go to my website, you can also go to bookdepository.com that delivers worldwide for free.
mm,
And I have a workshop coming up in Esselen, August 25 till 28,
mm,
where we're gonna work for 3 days in depth in a beautiful setting where people
mm,
can come with creative questions or relational or health, and connect in depth with the world of dream and get dreams and work with the dreams. And people can visit the website Jung Platform, JUNG
mm,
platform.com, where I have some courses, and I've gathered a lot of other people with courses in depth psychology and Jung, and all oriented for the regular person. So not
mm,
regular person till therapist, but you don't have to be an expert or have read this material.
mm. Wonderful.
And
And yeah, I'm sorry.
well, and I want to just urge people play with these ideas. It doesn't
Mm,
have to be perfect. Write down a question. If you listen to this whole episode, there's
mm,
something you're somehow primed to go into the night with a question. You don't have to believe it. You can say, "Gosh, dream, I it sounds plausible. I'm
Mm.
here just to test it. I would love. I'm struggling how to love myself more deeply.
Mhm.
Could you tell me what's one thing I can do to love myself more?
Mm.
And then
Mm.
just see what the dream comes up with.
So be curious, play with it, ask questions. Those are
Yes.
all pivotal. When you ask, you shall receive. And, Machiel is also on Instagram. I follow him. I love his posts too. So, Instagram, I know you have a wonderful, educational, informative, page there that I just absolutely love. So, do follow him. How could people follow you on Instagram? What's your name on it? Is it
Yeah, it's just my name, Machiel Klerk.
Machiel Klerk? Follow him on Instagram and check out his upcoming events. Well, we have to get you back. Thank you so much for your time, and you're just so thankful to the work that you do. From one, therapist to another, you just really inspire me. So please keep in touch, and thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you, Jacob. It was a delight to be with a fellow explorer of other states of
Explore.
consciousness. Yes.
Yeah. And going up the ladder and having the dream here of Jacob's ladder with Michiel and continuing that lineage and the importance and significance of the dream. Well, that was a wonderful episode. Thank you for tuning into episode 9 on the wisdom of Jacob's ladder with Michiel Klerk. I love this guy. He just had so much to share and offer, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to integrate, some of his dream incubations and the 5 steps and really follow up with him if you have any questions. So please make sure to like this video, share it, as well as subscribe to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And next week in episode 10, we'll be having Paul Selig on as my next guest, so stay tuned. Thank you for tuning into the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Jacob Cooper here, and thank you for listening to Machiel Klerk in my interview. More coming your way, and this was incredible. So thank you all.